Return to the drowned grid off Jutland, to the youngest layer of occupation before the storm took it, and you find something no disaster site should contain. No overturned hearths, no scattered tools, no bodies. The last season at the Salt Kingdom's coast looks less like a catastrophe and more like a closing shift. Someone locked up on their way out. The only question that has ever mattered is how they knew to. We have found a countdown carved into salt, confirmed exact on a doomed ship 19 years before the flood. We have found survivors, a generation later, quietly rebuilding the old religion in a Swedish bog. What we have not yet explained is the plainest fact of all. The people who made these vessels did not simply predict their ending. By every trace they left, they planned for it. A new survey season went back to the original grid, with tools the 1990s divers never had sediment corers that could date a layer to within a handful of years, not a handful of centuries. The goal was narrow and specific. Find the last season the Salt Kingdom's coast was fully lived in, and find out exactly how long the emptying took. The storerooms answered first. In house after house, the everyday clutter of a lived-in settlement remained exactly where it had been dropped: broken pots, worn tools, a child's carved toy. But the stores themselves were bare. Salt, dried fish, seed grain for the following spring, gone in every structure tested down to the last jar. Whoever left did not flee. They packed. The corer dates gave the packing a shape. Houses at the settlement's eastern edge, closest to open water, show their last activity years before the houses at its sheltered western edge. The Salt Kingdom did not leave in a single night. It left in stages, over what the team now calls, carefully, the empty winter, though the record suggests it was closer to several empty winters, spaced across the better part of a decade. One building broke the pattern entirely, and it is the one you would expect. The carver's workshop, home of the 7 bronze tools, the tradition unbroken for 4 centuries, was swept clean earlier than any storeroom, years before the first house on the exposed eastern edge. Whoever was in charge of leaving did not treat the tools as cargo. They treated them as the one thing that could not be replaced. The clearest record, though, was never in the houses. It was in the evaporation pools resurfaced. The clay linings show, again and again, generation after generation, each new layer laid slightly higher and slightly further inland than the last. The Salt Kingdom had been measuring the sea's advance for as long as it had been making salt, in the one medium it could not lie to itself about, the pools that fed it. Which returns us to the marks. If the pools kept a real, physical record of the water's advance across centuries, a carver counting in 3s would not have needed a vision of the future. They would have needed an old ledger, a steady hand, and the discipline to trust arithmetic over instinct. The countdown on every vessel may not be prophecy translated into salt. It may simply be tidal engineering translated into a religion. The team built a simple model from the pool data alone: no marks, no vessels, just centuries of clay layers and the rate at which the water had crept inland, and asked it to predict when the coastline would fail. It came back within 6 years of the actual storm layer. The Salt Kingdom, it turns out, did not need to see the future. They had been quietly building the only kind of forecast that has ever worked, a very long memory, kept honestly. Seen this way, the wreck off Crete stops looking like an isolated mission and starts looking like the plan's first move. 19 years before the end, with the pool ledgers already showing the coastline's arithmetic running out, a carver's apprentice sailed the length of the known world carrying the workshop's tools and a single votive vessel. Not to trade, to scout. The Salt Kingdom was already looking for somewhere else to be the Salt Kingdom. And Hult stops looking like an accident of survival. A generation after the flood, the same workshop, the same 7 tools, the same tradition, rebuilding on a dry ridge 400 kilometers inland. Not refugees improvising, but the continuation of a plan already decades in motion before the water ever rose. The empty winter did not end the Salt Kingdom. It relocated it on schedule. Not every house at Jutland was emptied. 3 structures on the settlement's sheltered side show no packing at all, full storerooms, tools left in place, the ordinary mess of people who expected to come back tomorrow. Whether they refused to believe the ledgers or were simply the ones the schedule ran out on first, the record does not say. Their names, like every name in this story, went into the water with everything else they didn't take. What the empty winter finally answers is smaller and stranger than a myth of foresight. This was never a people who could see the future. It was a people who refused to stop measuring the present honestly for 400 years, until the arithmetic told them something they didn't want to hear, and who then organized, over the better part of a decade, one of the most orderly evacuations in the archaeological record, while telling no story about it we have ever found. Which makes the message that reached the team 6 months ago difficult to ignore. A survey crew mapping an alpine valley, 400 kilometers from any coast in the opposite direction from Hult, has found a system of shallow, clay-lined pools, the exact profile of the Jutland evaporation works, in a place with no tide, no sea, and by every existing record, no salt trade of its own. Whether it is a coincidence of engineering, a forgotten colony, or something the pool ledgers were counting toward all along, that is a story for another time. If this pulled you in, subscribe. New mysteries drop regularly across every series in the Archive project. The next episode's waiting.